the existing hospital sites.
I just want to go on to something else that was in the previous plan. It's in this plan, and it was in the previous plan before the previous plan. It's about the 350 international treaties, conventions and protocols. Now, Mrs. Steedman has said she's considered all material facts, policies, whatever, that are relative to this application as far as her terms of reference are concerned. Have you looked at international obligations?
The policies in the plan and the assessments that are undertaken reflect those.
Well, yes, they were talking about privacy. Obviously, that's a human rights thing, that's international obligations. Have you looked at privacy in the context of human rights obligations? Have you looked at it?
Not specific to human rights, to that.
Well, I mean, is that a material consideration then for this application?
Well, privacy.
Well, privacy you say, so that's a human rights implication. So there are international obligations on privacy under many human rights obligations.
It's been looked at as a consideration for this application.
In the draft, it said the island is subject to more than 350 international treaties, conventions, and protocols, which carry legal and moral commitments as well as rights and obligations under international law. Those particularly relevant to the island plan include those concerning the environment. There are other agreements covering social and economic matters, such as human rights law, which will impact indirectly on the planning system and thus need to be taken into account. Well, which ones have you taken into account?
The policies reflect that context that you set out, and the assessments will taken.
There are 350. Have you taken 350 conventions into account? Clearly not, obviously not, because that figure hasn't changed for the 3 island plans, so obviously the figure has actually changed, so obviously the planning office is not very aware about international obligations anyway. But even if, suppose there was 350, how many of them would you have to take into consideration and an appraisal of a scheme like this?
I think the island plan, as regards to those 350 obligations, not all of them apply to individual policies. But for example, the Valletta Convention is an international obligation that talks about the protection of heritage. So, the heritage part of the island plan reflects the obligations in the Valletta Convention. So, and so forth for the Aarhus Convention about waste. All these conventions are about individual things. For example, the Ramsar Convention, which people in the room are probably aware of. The policies in the island plan reflect the obligations relative to the protection of wetlands that the Ramsar
Yeah, but the sort of obligations that I'm more interested in, I'm not so much an armourer, but I'm more about economic, social and cultural rights, European Convention of Human Rights, civil and political rights, United Nations Council of Europe, ILO, industrial labour rights. These are all things which have an implication as far as a project of this manifestation. I mean, disability. We've now got disability rights is on its way. Disability discrimination. By the time this building is finished, disability discrimination will be in place in Jersey, we hope.
I think if you go back to the adoption process of the island plan, the Minister of the Environment would have had to do a compliance test to see whether it complied with those international conventions. Now, it's been adopted. No one's challenged it. No one said that these policies are not in accordance with those conventions, whether they're legal or moral. The fact is, as applicants, we are entitled to take the island plan as the development plan we must judge our application.
But you feel you can pick and choose at your level of determination. You can pick and choose which. Let me just give you a specific. We've had a speaker who spoke very strongly about the damage that this building is going to cause to health of people, and he actually claimed that it will kill some children, will be killed during the process of demolition, building, and during the use of this building. Now, Jersey has just ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, obviously, the Convention on the Rights of the Child is very much relative to the welfare of children. And bearing in mind, we've just come through a £25 billion inquiry into the abuses that have been going on with children in this island since the war. So there's a huge backlog of failure as far as this. Now, Jersey, partly because of that inquiry, has ratified the Convention on Human Rights, which has just come into place. It's been ratified for local implementation. Have you taken any account of it? These concerns about the welfare, health of children, it's the whole family, not just the child, of people in the use of this building.
I'm going to interrupt you there. I think this is going to just carry on in the same vein, and you're going to get the same answers. I'm familiar with the issues that you're raising. My focus will be on an assessment against the island plan.
Well, these are implications, are they not?
You are now well over 12 minutes, Ewan.
Wow.
I do have other people that I need to get on, so if you could make the points and we can get through.
Well, I would just close on that. I'm going to just come back to you a few more minutes, if I may. I find it deplorable that we're attempting. I mean, the implication, the island plan, it was written in there, these will be integral part of it, and they will be considered. Now, we're saying we're not considering them. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I was especially pleased to hear Mr. McCarthy's evidence. I've never met the guy, I don't know him, because he clarified how inadequately the public participation has been organised for this thing. And as we've seen, there are 75, I think, written submissions from the public. I think there's one in favour, but I've attended as much as I can of what's been going on. And the opportunity to discuss the proposals has been minimal. Bear in mind the discussion isn't just going around looking at stuff on a wall. You need more than that to get to understand what the project is all about.
I think it's a little better. There's been a significant amount of public engagement in this. I don't want to get into what constitutes a significant amount. We, as part of the evidence we submitted to the inspector, in order to set context, we did indicate the amount of the 200 or so events that have taken place.
Well,
we're satisfied that we've...
I submitted, as you know...
That doesn't mean to say that we're resting on our laurels. We will further engage with people later in the process, and are willing to have that enshrined as a condition attached to any planning commission that there needs to be a period of consultation, and we need to demonstrate that we've done that before we submit the reserve application.
One of the projects that the inspector may not realise that the government of this island is forever putting things out to so-called consultation. The public is swamped with things, and the public just do not have the expertise or knowledge or time to respond to them. On things like, if it's about the legal aid system, the lawyers will respond. But other things generally, disability discrimination, those sort of things, trying to produce an access strategy for the whole island, these things are just beyond the ability. And it's so lacking, as you will have seen on this, that we've got political leaders who said they were in the States and they saw the presentation, and if now, knowing what they know now, they would have voted against it as opposed to for it. This is the level of lack of understanding. This is what the inspector needs to understand. This is part of what they were in the child inquiry. This is the Jersey way. Things are done with superficial, incomplete information. The laws that do apply are not applied. They're not followed through. And I think this is it's a misleading application. It's more than misleading. I would go further than what Senator Ferguson said. I think it's deliberately misleading in order that the public don't know the information. And bear in mind, there's a whole thing going around the world at the moment about Paradise Island. And I think Paradise Island Plan 2011 is a little thought we ought to put in our mind, because this typifies the way this island is conducted. They all talk about the Jersey way and all this thing. But this is typical of the way it's to present to the public the minimum information so we can rubber stamp it, get an approval, and then carry on regardless. And I think it's quite disgraceful exercise. I will leave it there because I'm aware of your timescale, but there was much more I would say. And I did submit, as you know, my videos to show a chronology of the attempts of the public to engage, demonstrations that did take place, and the dissent that did take place, and the failure of the government to respond to that, and the way they just overnight adopted this plan for this site. And I think the whole procedure is totally, well, I think it's illegal.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to